A lot of people today find themselves dissatisfied with the larger gaming market, a sentiment that I've grown to understand and agree with. A lot of AAA games seem to leave players searching for more. This is why over the past few years I've found myself playing indie games far more than the big releases. Games made by small teams or even one person usually find creative ways to implement mechanics, unique avenues to approach narratives, and are just generally more ambitious as a whole. So today I'd like to talk about a few indie games that I've really enjoyed lately. I tried to pick a variety of different games so that even if one genre isn't your thing, there might still be something here that you're interested in. I've also provided myself with two constraints when picking games. One, the games had to be made by indie developers, and two, they had to have less than 1,500 reviews on Steam. This number told me that they were somewhat undiscovered, maybe gaining a bit of a fan base, but no wider push. And a lot of these games have turned out to be true hidden gems. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps me out. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to talk about underrated indie games. Dungeons of Blood and Dream is a first-person roguelike action game developed by Laurie Voronoi. It was released on November 11th, 2024. Dungeons of Blood and Dream is an incredibly unique roguelike game. Releasing a roguelike dungeon crawler in 2024 is an uphill battle, a fight against the market, a struggle with the past. Lose this battle and you have a game that doesn't stand out among the games in the genre that came before. Win this battle and you have something entirely new, something that feels like an evolution of the genre, a creation that somehow sheds its own shackles and becomes separate. Luckily, Dungeons of Blood and Dream happens to win this battle and comes out the other side without a scratch on it. I was lucky enough to have Voronoi answer a few of my questions over email. Dungeons of Blood and Dream began as making a more fast-paced, roguelike version of Daggerfall Dungeons, but the real experimentation and mystery came from the inspiration of games like Ultima Underworld and Kingsfield. In Dungeons of Blood and Dream, we play a blood wizard, a puppet of the true humans, a race of beings that control new power and evil in this world. We have been ensnared and captured by a being jealous of our own power and trapped within a dream. If we die in this dream, we wake up in a prison created for us and must fall asleep once again to try and escape. This is the story that frames our time in Dungeons of Blood and Dream, but what this actually looks like is a little more complicated. Dungeons of Blood and Dream is a roguelike action game, so that means we start out with nearly nothing in the first area of the game, the dungeon. We're armed with a broken sword, and that's about it. The goal in each level is to move through the area, fight our way to the end, and beat the boss to open a portal to the next level. Each room that we enter has a purpose. Some rooms just contain enemies that we can defeat to gain gold and health. Others contain gravestones that can be dug up for a random reward or boon. Some contain rare altars that we can give sacrifices to in exchange for health or currency. But Dungeons of Blood and Dream's most unique aspects come in the form of its main mechanics. One of the main ways that we upgrade our character and obtain more power, health, jumps, or really any sort of upgrade are by wearing rings. We have 4 fingers on each hand and can equip rings on each of those fingers. There are a ton of rings in the game, and each ring can have multiple properties that change depending on which finger they are worn on. When we first get a ring, either from a random drop or buying one from the shops we can encounter in the game, we can see how many properties it has and how many we've identified. The more we choose to wear specific rings in the game, the more we'll remember about how they work. It is truly shocking just how many combinations of rings there are in the game. There's somewhere around 30 rings in total, and each one has a special attribute associated with it. Some rings, like the key ring, will allow us to open all doors that require keys. Some, like the spike ring, will cause us to not take damage from spikes. but a lot of the rings have variable effects based on where you place them. Take for example the Goblin Ring. With this handy chart made from the Dungeons of Blood and Dream wiki, shout out, we can see that placing it on the left thumb takes 5 max health away and increases our speed to 2. But putting it on the left index decreases our damage by 3 and increases our attack speed by 0.6. This ring system alone provides the game a ton of replayability. You may have completed multiple runs, but maybe you never put the Goblin Ring on your right thumb, and when you encounter it, that's the only spot that you have open. Dungeons of Blood and Dream, as a general rule, encourages experimentation. And while the wiki and things like it are incredibly useful, I would also urge you to at least exhaust the game of all of its mysteries before you consult these resources, because a lot of the joy in this game is found from stumbling upon things yourself. When you go to pick up rings, we'll also get comments from the masks on the left side of the screen. These masks are trapped inside of our mind prison. Some will tell us a ring is useful or bad. Honestly, I'll leave this mystery to you and won't explain it entirely because I think it's more fun if you deduce what's going on here yourself. But obviously, some of them can be trusted and others can't. In addition to rings, we can find and drink a variety of potions around the levels of this game. When we stumble across potions, they will have 2 smells that we can sense upon inspection. These can be anything from earth, seawater, sulfur, urine, blood, apples, or mint. There's around 30 different smells in the game, and different combinations have different effects. Of course, when we first see a potion, we can start to learn what effects they'll have, and they aren't all good. Some potions will decrease our attack speed, make us slower, make us feel ill, and I still don't actually know what that does, by the way. But some make us stronger or make enemies drop more gold. This is another way that the game forces us to experiment. The game makes us try new things. It forces us out of our comfort zone. Bad runs aren't bad runs in Dungeons of Blood and Dream. They're just moments to learn and get better. A simple framework, and one that has been used time and time again in the genre, but one that this game pushes even further. Potions and rings are both temporary progression. Most of the time, our rings and potion effects will disappear when we die. To get permanent progression, we can use dream spheres that we collect from dead enemies and bosses in the dream to pay the idols in our cell. These idols can fix our broken sword that we start the game with, increase our damage, health, etc. This is a pretty standard form of progression in any roguelike, but Dungeons of Blood and Dream also contains a more unique form of progression in that of concepts. If we manage to stumble upon brains while we're surviving the floors of our own dream, we'll unlock new concepts. We can then reference these concepts in conversations with NPCs, ones found in secret rooms, the shopkeep, or our own reflection. These conversations will jog our memory and unlock new weapons or rings that we can find in subsequent runs of the game. It's a fantastic way to reinforce the setting, a dream world prison, but also make the game feel more ethereal and otherworldly. Obviously, this game has aesthetic on its side as well. Low poly PS1 or PS2 design with a ton of color, massive contrast, and really interesting characters. Every world, every room feels like an alien place. Everything just feels a bit off, and it isn't the shadows chasing us or the bloody spikes on the wall, it's the general tone and atmosphere. Voronoi said that this aesthetic came from their love of Ultima Underworld and classic CRPGs like Menzo Berenzan. It was the memories of this style that created the game we see here, rather than a direct recreation of that style. The game also has a sort of fencing mechanic included in combat. Based on the way we move, left or right, our guard will change to one side or the other. This will deflect different attacks from that side. There are rings that affect this system, making it easier to deflect attacks from that side. This was a system I rarely ever had to interact with because I was usually moving way too fast in combat to even worry about it. But the moments when I was slowed, it became something that I had to keep in mind because I was often not able to dodge attacks. Something that this game does so well is mystery. There's a large goal behind all of this gameplay, and it isn't just to get to the bosses at the end of the game, it's to find out the identity of our captor. We have to learn his name. Bosses will drop notes that will give us different letters of this name, and we can input them into the wall back in the cell. Dungeons of Blood and Dream gives us a notebook to keep track of some of this information, and if you are really inclined, you could use this notebook for many things. Which smells in a potion were commonly positive, which rings had which effects, a list of spells to cast, and what sigils you needed to use. This game doesn't just feel like a throwback because of its art style and environment design, it feels like a throwback because of what it asks from the player. It asks the player to remember things, to solve mysteries, to actually try and learn more about the game. And that's the most precious piece of this whole puzzle, the one that I hope this video won't disturb. Dungeons of Blood and Dream feels like we're in an alien world trying to decipher the way that this world works. We're given a PS1 style manual upon starting the game that will act as a starter's guide, a tourist's pamphlet to this world. But understanding the ins and outs of its systems is really up to us. The reason that this game feels this way is that it's trying to articulate the struggle that comes with interpreting a dream. Is that even something that's possible? Most of us aren't in a dream long enough to even comprehend our surroundings, let alone take notes or commit things to memory. But that's what this game asks of you, that you become a translator and learn the language. Dungeons of Blood and Dream not only asks us to learn to communicate, but to fight, to summon, to grow stronger, to escape. If you do end up playing Dungeons of Blood and Dream, which you should, I include one warning here. Even if you feel tempted, do not spoil it for yourself. Don't look it up. Uncover the game's secrets on your own and attempt to learn how this dream world works. Trust me, you'll be better rewarded in the end. Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams is a first-person platforming game developed by Soda It was released on October 29th, 2021. Hypnagogia is a very inspired work, and that's not just because the game wears its inspirations on its sleeve, that's because it feels like a game made with purpose, with intent. Hypnagogia is aptly titled because it's a game about dreams. At the beginning of the game, we see the shattering of the dream crystal. We speak to a large bird named Hypno, who tells us that we are in the dream nexus. And the dream crystal is the living, beating heart of imagination itself. Because this artifact has shattered, we need to seek out the pieces of it and reassemble this crystal, bringing balance back to this plane. This means that we'll have to travel to many different worlds, exploring places, solving problems, and collecting shards. The premise for this game is incredibly simple, and to be honest, so is most of the gameplay. But don't let that fool you, because Hypnagogia is one of the most impressive, beautiful pieces of art that I've ever seen. And I'm not being hyperbolic for the sake of it, I genuinely love this game. There's just something about this whole package that felt like it was specifically made for me. While I talk about a lot of bleak games on this channel, my favorite type of media is something with hope at its core, something uplifting, not just fluff, but a complicated piece. Hypnagogia feels like its true core is genuine hope and perseverance. In the first few levels of the game, we explore these dream worlds that are based on the developer's own dreams. Beating the game, we can actually look at some commentary from Soda for each of the worlds, including excerpts from their own dream journal. And a lot of that comes through in the game, but the worlds feel like they make sense within their own reality. The game at points will feel a bit surreal, but that never feels like the point. The point feels like to get across an emotion or message within each level. Each theme displays something, like the opening level's workers all complaining about their job. This was inspired by conversations that the developer had at their own job, and just the general poor working conditions that people put up with. But it's presented in this PS1 aesthetic that almost feels like a world that's ripped straight out of Spyro. The simple level design, the cartoony characters, the floating collectible glittering above us in the main room. This is what a lot of the worlds in the beginning of the game feel like. The second world is a true ode to vaporwave and feels like exploring one of those cover arts from the peak of the genre in around the early 2010s. But it never literally feels like that. The inspiration is always used in a very meaningful way. Reference and homage is not used in this game as a way to meme or take pop culture and use it as a talking point. It's used as a genuine and faithful tribute to the things that it seems like this developer cares about, or at least finds interesting.
Well, from the beginning, like my main inspiration was the LSD Dream Emulator game for PS1. Just that kind of vibe matched together with a lot of the games that I grew up with. So like games like Ape Escape, Mario 64, Metal Gear Solid vibes in there. It's just sort of this big amalgamation of like all of the games that I wouldn't distinctly label as being an inspiration, but more of just every game that I kind of remember playing as a kid rolled into one kind of visual style.
Hypnagogia is pretty short if we just beat all of the levels and collect all of the dream shards, but playing the game like that would be like quitting the game when you're halfway to the goal. Each of the levels has a secret level inside of it, one that you can only find if you've thoroughly explored the area and taken your time with it. There's an entire secret area that sort of uses Ocarina of Time for its inspiration, as we get a hook shot and bomb mechanics inside of the temple, and then never again throughout the rest of the game. We have to solve a temple with 4 different sections, one for each element, and the end of this sequence is just this beautifully touching moment with a character that we met earlier in the game, a character that was initially introduced as kind of a joke, but it becomes incredibly real very fast. Now, I will be spoiling Hypnagogia, because around the middle section of the game, it changes pretty heavily and has a turn that I think makes it truly special. Of course, if you don't want spoilers, you can skip to the next chapter of the video, which is marked out on the timeline below. If this game looks at all interesting to you, then I just recommend going and playing it right now. It's a truly one-of-a-kind experience that is a mesh of wildly different inspirations and a wonderfully unique perspective. Beautiful imagery, a fantastic narrative, and a shockingly good soundtrack. If it looks like something you'll like, then I promise you that you'll like it. If you aren't ever going to play it, then you can keep watching. Around the halfway point of the game, a character that's introduced pretty early on, Gogi, becomes corrupted. Gogi protects the dream worlds from becoming corrupted, ensuring that they don't turn into nightmares. But since Gogi has himself become corrupted, these dreams take a turn from calming atmospheric exploration segments to horrific, terrifying vignettes. This transition begins when we enter Ice World, a world that is quite unlike any of the others. It's still relatively normal, but it's a bit more bleak. The people in this world are freezing, barely on the brink of survival, a species now forced to adapt to the cold. There's a somber tone here as we seek out the last survivors of this city and try to keep them warm by giving them hugs. Our ultimate goal is to return a dog to his owner, only to find out that these two are spirits, and they fade out of existence before we get the dream shard and leave. After this, we travel to a sci-fi world with unfeeling, uncaring robot creatures. An eldritch being casts us into a black hole, and suddenly we play as Gogi. Gogi is corrupted by an unseen force, and suddenly we're entering Haunted World. At first, Haunted World seems like a maybe just spooky house full of ghosts, but things start to seem a bit off when we take a trip to its secret level in a school. A terrifying atmosphere greets us, bloodstains on the walls, horrific demons waiting around every corner. It's clear that the boundless dreams have become boundless nightmares. And then we head to Mall World, which slowly degrades as we try to help a lost child find her missing items. The place eventually turns into a level ripped straight from Silent Hill, wire grating on the walls and endless chasms before us. The whole thing is this terrifying, horrific change, especially because the game has spent most of its runtime telling us to get comfortable, to be calm, to slow down. In the beginning few levels, many different NPCs will tell us that we should just relax and take things easy, that we should really take in the world. And in the beginning of the game, I was super interested in the art. I was rushing into levels to try and beat them faster so I could see the next one. But when the game told me to slow down, I honored its request. I took that as a message from the developer, that they wanted its players to appreciate its art, and so I did. And I'm sure that was part of the motivation, but this also softens the player up for the horror that's going to come. It makes the contrast of these final worlds all the more jarring. The final world in Hypnagogia sees us climbing 3 massive towers. Throughout these towers, blood will rain down. We'll see people lying off to the side, suffering, lacking the will to go on. These people will ask us for help, and we have the option to tell them to keep going or to stay in this place, an option we ourselves are given. This is the place of the people who have given up, who have had no choice but to give up, the downtrodden, the broken, the bruised. When we reach the top of this world, we're greeted by a presence that called us here. This presence guides us to the final stage of the game, one long collection of platforms where we're greeted by the spirits of all the characters that we've talked to throughout our journey. They each tell our character how we have affected their lives and how that was important to them. There was a glimpse of this earlier in the game when we married the talking door in the mushroom world. She talks about how much the main character changed her life and how she knows that he will change other lives, but that she wants this promise from him. And this is just such a beautiful way to end the game. It takes the classic hub world approach from PlayStation 1 era games and runs with it. I really miss hub world games. There's something I really enjoyed when I was younger, but those games often feel like we have a lack of impact on those worlds. Hypnagogia feels like we have the impact of a nuclear bomb, but like a good nuclear bomb, a nuclear bomb of being nice. We're just traveling to these worlds to get the things that we need. We help these people out, but it's not out of the kindness of our hearts, it's to advance the plot. But when we're greeted with them, maybe that outlook changes a bit. And maybe after playing this game, there's something you can take with you, something that you can bring out of these dreams and nightmares and apply it to the real world. The impact of decisions, actions, and words.
I would say that there's just sort of this inherent feeling I have when I want to make any kind of piece of art that I want to have the viewer or the player kind of experience some sort of roller coaster of emotion and not end on anything that might make them feel, worse than how the world right now makes people feel. We have enough stuff going on that it would suck to sit down and play a game and feel really awful when you finished it.
And the sage from the first level of the game even directly tells us this during the final sequence. I hope you took something from all this. It'd be quite silly if you came all this way and didn't learn anything. Hypnagogia has a tone and style that is just infectious. It feels like a smile from a person you've never met. Why is that person so happy? Just knowing that someone could be that happy rises something inside of us as people. We want to share in that joy as well. It only helps that the game is absolutely gorgeous, incredibly fun to play, has deeply sad, incredibly happy, and darkly terrifying moments scattered throughout it. The soundtrack is amazing, with each world's theme fitting directly with the world that it's centered around. A Vaporwave track for the Vaporwave-inspired world, a Legend of Zelda-inspired theme for the Secret Temple, and many beautiful PlayStation 1-inspired songs. I don't know if I've ever played a game that has more fit the bill for the word underrated, because I think everyone should play this game. Critters for Sale is a point-and-click adventure game developed by Sonoshi. It was released on June 3rd, 2021. Critters for Sale, like a lot of the games on this list, is pretty difficult to describe, but it somehow beats every other game that I've talked about in surrealism, horror, and atmosphere. Critters for Sale is part terror-inducing melancholy, part time-bending journey across space, and part pop culture comedy. You'll witness universe-altering rituals, you'll ally yourself with a time-traveling Michael Jackson, you'll witness the rise of an ancient being named Stefan Burnett, who would become immortal and, after 1,000 years in the shadows, go on to create Sacramento, California-based noise band Death Grips. Critters for Sale is a beautiful, punchy, short, and absolutely stunning game. The game has 5 stories overall, each titled after a specific critter: snake, goat, monkey, spider, and dragon. 3 of these tales contain branching paths, which contain multiple endings based on the choices that we make throughout the story. In Snake, we might go meet Michael Jackson at the Limelight Club and get wrapped up in the Noid Men drama, or we might ignore his text and become smothered by a statue while we dream. All of the stories beautifully tie together into an overall narrative that is quite hard to comprehend. In a very Lynchian way, though, Critters for Sale feels like it's more about the images, the sounds, the emotions, rather than what actually happens. What happens is far less important here than why or who or how. And along the way, we can get lost in the stunning art that this game holds. With simple black and white pixels, Critters for Sale displays full-on paintings in front of us, just gorgeous scenery and characters that exude a completely original style. This style meshes pop culture literals and references with a new world, an original story that feels full of life, graphic imagery and horror that is both disorienting and shocking. The only way to understand something you don't know is to be afraid, to be weary of its boundless depths. The story itself is something that I won't go too deep into because it's worth just checking out on your own. The narrative doesn't limit itself to, well, really anything. Of course, it uses real figures from time to time. At a certain point, the game will just play a minute or so of video from a Death Grips live set. We'll be treated to the sounds of the Fever AA as we watch Death Grips perform in front of a live audience. The story doesn't limit itself to the bounds of reality. We're never really sure which reality or how many this story is taking place in. At the beginning of some of the stories, we'll see a brief description of our character, their age, name, location, and the time period. But this is liable to shift and alter as things happen throughout our narrative. But this is sort of where our grasp on the narrative begins and ends. The game truly feels like a fever dream, being able to explain general things and what they looked like vividly, but unable to answer specific questions like why or how. Because the why and the how really don't matter here. We've entered a new dimension, and those questions feel foreign on the tongue. They have answers, sure, but would those answers heal or harm? And that's a question in its own right. The best thing about this game, though, is going back through each chapter and searching for the hidden endings. Some are as simple as just choosing no instead of yes in a certain dialogue. Others are more complicated and require multiple steps, uncovering hidden secrets. And the story's final chapter requires that we take information from the other chapters and compile it to solve the game's final mystery. The only real complaint that I have about the game is just that it's so short. I got all of the endings in a couple hours or so, and by the final cliffhanging teaser hit, I realized I just wanted more of this strange, mind-bending, alternate reality. But I suppose some of the mysteries are better left in the dark. Part of the atmosphere that comes from Critters for Sale is knowing that you don't know. You understand pretty early on in the first chapter that this won't make that much sense, and that the game isn't planning to stop to explain itself. And it never really does. There are brief moments of connection between the stories, short moments where a character from one chapter appears in another, and we get a glimpse at a larger overarching narrative. But at the end of the day, Critters for Sale is taking you along for a journey, and that journey won't stop until it reaches its conclusion. You're strapped to the roof of a train, staring at the sky. There isn't time to stop and observe each cloud, each star, each flickering light. You just have to take it in while it's there. Offering yourself up like this requires some level of vulnerability. In that way, this game requires something from the player, a specific level of engagement, before you can peruse its wares. but Critters for Sale manages to have full control over a switch that flicks back and forth between laughing at itself, laughing at the player, and attempting to terrify you. It's a three-sided switch, and that would only make sense for this game. But during its short runtime, Critters for Sale showcases an excellent, incredibly unique story, wonderful imagery and themes, brutal tales of darkness encroaching, and universal threats taking over. It's a great time, and I highly recommend checking it out. Sonoshi is also currently working on another point-and-click adventure set in Shanghai and aiming for release in 2026. It looks just as weird and horrific as Critters for Sale. Kowloon's Curse: Lost Report is a narrative-focused, turn-based RPG that was developed by Studio Notes. It was released on March 22nd, 2023. Lost Report isn't even a full game. It's a free prologue to a larger game that Studio Notes is working on. That being said, this free prologue made me incredibly excited for the full game and has made it one of my most anticipated games right now. The prologue is a short little adventure through a harsh city that follows a tale of two lifelong friends. But even though it's free, it's still a decent length. There's a good amount of secrets, side quests, and replayability to be had. In Lost Report, we play a character named Tony who lives in Kowloon, a city that's obvious inspiration comes from the famous Kowloon walled city. This inspiration can be seen in the design of the city itself. Lost Report controls like a classic dungeon crawler. Press forward to move one tile forward, right to turn right, etc. This means that the city, its alleys, dungeons, and streets are laid out in claustrophobic narrow passageways, reflecting this control scheme and general design. In Kowloon, Tony works for a larger crime family in the city, along with his best friend, Sergio. The two are sent on a job to pick up a briefcase in the city and transport it back to their employers. The setup is simple, but as you can probably already tell, things will start to go horribly wrong, causing conflict in this little dynamic that's set up. There's a lot of great things that I'd like to showcase with this game, and one of the best things is just how well it's written. A lot of the dialogue from random characters can often feel surreal at times, like we're living in a city of dream. Like the strange creatures that stand on the edges of the streets, of the crowds of people that appear as nameless faces and shadows. But a lot of Lost Report is presented as reflections of our own reality, realistic situations that normal people get involved in every day, conversations that you've probably heard before. One of the side quests sees us finding a woman in the streets who gives us a money-making opportunity. We can call a number from a nearby payphone and talk to a man who promises us a massive return on our investment if we just go buy him some gift cards from a local shop. Even this scene between Tony and Sergio, where Sergio is talking about a podcast that he listens to where the hosts described a drug called smocaine that causes you to hallucinate. They bring up studies and research that totally proves that these hallucinations are the real world and we're just living in a simulation. It's this grounded tone that Kowloon has in between all of the surreal stuff around it. Dreams that don't make sense, an overarching bureau that seems to have some control over cycles of reality. The melding of these two tones and these two worlds allows Lost Report to be an incredibly interesting and unique trip through this world, but also a grounded story about real characters. Sergio in particular is such a complex individual. I won't totally spoil what happens in the story, but Sergio's kind of an asshole. He makes life harder for us, he's been dealt a shit hand and wants to make it better. Oh, did I mention that Sergio is a rapper? And even though the game paints the song as terrible, it's a damn banger.
No matter what you do, you can't stop me. I'm like a freight train, I'm never stopping. I'm on top of the world and I'm never looking back. I'm the king of the smoking, baby. No one can touch me, I'm untouchable. I'm like a machine, I'm always running. I'm always hustling, always on the move. I'm the prince of the smoking, baby. No one can catch me, I'm too fast.
He's also mean to the waitress during lunch, which is just unforgivable. Sergio's dreams of making it big in hip-hop are what's propelling him forward, but at the core of this, Sergio just wants to get out of here. He just wants to have money, he just wants to have freedom and success. And I'm sure we've all met someone at some point that's at least a bit similar to Sergio, a friend who we can't entirely make excuses for. They're just like that. And this game really tests how you will interface with that relationship, how far you will go to make these two sides meet. Outside of that, the world of Kowloon's Curse is great. Dark alleyways and narrow streets hold interesting conversations around every corner. A purple monster, a pixel art soldier, a four-eyed floating alien, small creatures that traverse the sewers of the city and keep it running remain mysterious after they kill anyone that corners them. The world just begs to be explored, and you genuinely want to talk to everyone because even if what they have to say isn't important to the main quest that we're sent out on, it could be a funny little story, an interesting line about the world, or something more. I honestly can't talk too much about the battle system in this game because we don't really do a lot of battling throughout the runtime of Lost Report. It seems like this prologue was more focused on the story and the world rather than the actual turn-based fighting. What we see here is pretty simple, a system that I assume will be upgraded once the full game is released. We have different skills that take from different aspects of your character's personality. Hacking people's phones and spreading their secrets online will cause them enough embarrassment to take damage, or we can just shoot them in the face. We can do basic attacks, we can heal with different items that we can buy or find throughout the story. All of your standard turn-based battle system stuff. But Kowloon's Curse Lost Report really excels at its overall tone. It's the game's ability to juggle an incredibly serious and deep story without sacrificing the lighter parts of its world. The jokes in between still manage to hit when things get hard, and the emotional gravity of the story's bigger scenes still hold weight when we get to those points. And of course, I said I wouldn't spoil the game. I do think its final moments should be seen rather than told. But I could ramble for another 10 minutes about the reveals and what its implications are for our main characters, how their relationship has developed over the years. It's just very good. I honestly cannot wait for Kowloon's Curse to release. It's easily one of my most anticipated games right now, and that's because I just don't really think games like this are getting made. Games with this kind of scope, this style of writing, this aesthetic, and this ability. And that excitement just comes from playing a 1-hour prologue of that game. I could easily take 10 or 20 or 30 more. Kowloon's Curse Lost Report is free, and it only takes a couple hours to play depending on how long you spend in its world. So give it a shot. You really have nothing to lose. Motordoom is a BMX roguelike shooter game developed by Hobocat Games. It was released on August 2nd, 2024. I was really excited for Motordoom to release, and when it finally came out, it exceeded my expectations. There's nothing better than being really excited for a game and having it actually be as good as you thought it was going to be. Motordoom meshes two genres, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater style sports tricks and combos using BMXs instead of skateboards, and roguelike action games that see you dying and trying over and over again to get further in the game and unlock more mechanics. There are multiple levels in Motordoom. Each one sees you trying to survive long enough to beat a boss at the end. But the way that you do that is a bit more complicated. Just like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, you can string together combos with tricks, grabs, and manuals, or wheelies in this game. In Motordoom, we can also use kills to add to our combo. We can kill demons around the level by holding down the shoot button while we're driving around. You would think this is difficult to manage while also trying to combo, but just trust me, it becomes second nature pretty quickly. When we land a combo, we get a certain amount of experience points. These increase our level, and every time we level up, we get to pick from 3 cards. These cards can do a variety of things: summon lightning when we shoot, summon a sigil when we wheelie, increase health, etc., etc. There's a ton of modifiers in the game, which adds a lot of variety to each run that we do. Building up our character throughout the run is important because once the timer at the top of the screen reaches 0, we have to fight a boss. These get progressively harder as the game goes on, but if you have any experience with games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, then I would recommend upping the difficulty because it's pretty easy to hit max level in like 2 or 3 minutes. Also on the lower difficulties, hitting a large combo and landing it will see you getting like 20 levels all at once, so you spend a large portion of your time sitting there sifting through all of the cards, deciding how to build your character. The game also has perma upgrades. When you kill enemies, you'll collect gears, and you can use these gears to unlock different parts of your bike. Each character has their own upgrade tree and can unlock different weapons, power-ups, all kinds of stuff that'll change the way that you play that character. These things incentivize playing the game through again and again to try and unlock everything. The game also just oozes a ton of style with interesting and goofy characters, tons of monster designs and levels that eventually just evolve into total hellscape Doom territory. But the weird thing about this game is just how good it is at being both a roguelike, Vampire Survivors style game, while also being a pretty damn good skating game, even though there isn't any skating in it. I would often play through a new level and defeat the boss, focusing mostly on getting high combos. Then I would just come back through the level and try to sweep up all the objectives, looking for all the secrets that the game had to offer. It really felt like this new and interesting package that beautifully married a bunch of different genres. It's part Doom, part roguelike, part Pro Skater, part Vampire Survivors. Mix these all together and you have a very new and exciting product that doesn't really feel like any of those things, but this completely new creation. The game is very addicting too. The score meter at the top of the screen will eventually chain itself to you in a toxic relationship that eats up your time. I spent so much time trying to max out my score and see how far I could really take it. Motordoom also isn't very long. I think I got all the objectives and achievements in a few hours, but I stuck around trying to get high scores, and the whole thing just felt like a great throwback to early 2000s gaming. Motordoom captures the feeling of this era, but it also captures the reason that you keep people coming back. The reason that we play these games in the first place. High scores, collectibles, unlockables, and just generally getting better. The game's aesthetic obviously mirrors that of 90s or 2000s gaming and almost everything outside of its HUD. The soundtrack is even fantastic, mirroring that hard rock / metal style that was always featured in the skating and BMX games of the past. Motordoom is an honest and true love letter to a genre of gaming that's basically fallen by the wayside in recent years. A genre that was incredibly formative for most of the people that started playing games at that time. It nails everything that those games did right, while also adding in a lot more to the mix, and getting those things right as well. It isn't an easy task to pull off, it's actually a pretty big ask of a project, but Motordoom just nails it. And I had so much fun with this game. If I had one complaint, it would be that I wish there were more levels. By the time I had completed everything, I just really wanted more from the project. I can't complain too much because the game is only $15, so you're really getting more than your money's worth here, especially when you factor in the time it'll take to unlock everything. But I really hope the game can get enough attention to maybe get an expansion pack or a big update at some point, because I will definitely be coming back for more. Judero is an action-adventure game developed by Talha and Jack, and it was released on September 16th, 2024. Talha and Jack is a collaborative developer made up of two individuals, Jack King Spooner and Talha Kaya. Spooner has been developing games for a while, since working on projects like Dujana and B-Swing. Talha Kaya has worked on games like Pill Baby and Soul Searching. The two joined forces to make their first official work together in that of Judero. Judero is an odd game, one that's kind of hard to quantify. I would obviously recommend playing it for yourself, because with a project like this, there's really only so much heavy lifting that words can do. In this game, we play a Celtic warrior named Judero. Judero has come to the end of a long journey with this traveling companion, Mob, and at the beginning of the game, these two friends part in a tearful goodbye. Judero is forced to go it alone, traveling across the world, helping strangers and villagers as he stumbles upon their woes. His goal eventually becomes to seek out the Glass Mountain, where he's meant to find closure and an ending to this story. Judero leans heavily on Celtic folklore, Scottish culture, and tall tales in general. The beginning of the game feels like the end of an odyssey, a long quest and journey that we're not privy to, that we did not see. But that doesn't mean that the quest is over, that the journey is entirely behind us. Judero sort of feels like a long epilogue to the adventures of this warrior. Traveling across these foreign lands, we'll have to slay many a beast and fell a ton of foes. Judero can fight with his staff. A basic combo can be pulled off by pressing the attack button in quick succession. Killing enemies and finding chests will net us coins. These coins can be used to purchase new skills for Judero to use. The basic 4 skills available from the first town are pretty weak, though they do have their moments. A spinning attack, a projectile throw, a dash attack, and a tornado that we can summon. We can get some special abilities later in the game, but only if we collect enough coin to afford these expensive extras. The beasts we fight range from magic wizards inhabiting another realm to small worms that shoot balls of energy at us. The game has a ton of enemies, and even in its last act, it's still introducing new ones constantly. We can also possess enemies at different points in the game. This is one of the main puzzle mechanics that Judero uses. We'll usually have to possess creatures and then use their attacks or powers to remove some sort of obstacle in the way. I loved this mechanic, especially the way that it looks. The weird, ethereal spirit flying out of Judero and how he stays focusing while we do it. It all just looks so great. There's also this odd tone here. We feel like we're using the environment, nature, that's constantly fighting against us. A wild and untamable force has been tamed. We have mastery over the kingdom of wild growth. We'll learn to summon these enemies later so we can possess them anywhere, and it feels kind of odd. We summon them to possess them and use their abilities, only to then kill them and take their life. This mastery and power seems like too much to wield, but maybe we're just returning some sort of balance to the world since we've disrupted it. Now, obviously, you've probably noticed Judero's aesthetic by now, and that's probably its strongest suit overall. Judero obviously has a very distinct style, and this is because everything in the game was made physically in the real world first. Spooner created all of the assets for the game by crafting them by hand and taking images, creating stop-motion animations. A lot of the character models you can see are just action figures that have been altered with clay modeling. Some of these are obviously far more altered than others, but it's this style, this level of painstaking effort and work that really sits at the core of Judero and makes it what it is. I haven't worked with clay much in my life, but I have painted miniatures and things like that, and I can't possibly imagine doing that for this many different models. And it's even more impressive when you see just how many unique characters, enemies, and NPCs there are in the game. Some of the characters, particularly ones inside of houses, are hand-drawn on paper, so it's a bit less work than creating a clay model with your hands, but still. And this extends to the environments, weapons, everything in the game. This obviously makes Judero look unique, but it also gives it a very particular tone. The game feels handmade, and that's easy to say once you've seen the developer crafting models by hand, but it's not just that. Judero is a bit rough around the edges. Not everything in the game is perfect. At certain points, you can see the green screen outline of characters. Sometimes the camera doesn't know what to do and bounces back and forth. Sometimes your hits don't register like they should, but these little imperfections make Judero what it is. The game asks you to take it at face value and respect it for the path that it chose to take. It's the difference between buying a scarf on Amazon and getting one from your friend as a gift. Maybe your friend just started crochet and they aren't that skilled. It might have some loose strands here or there, but these imperfections are overshadowed by the amount of passion, care, and emotion that was put into the game. The game is itself a clay model created by kneading and molding with the hands. Little ridges in the face, small divots where they shouldn't be, but they are, and that's Judero. While it's hard to pinpoint an inspiration, Judero sort of has vague threads of TV shows like Action League Now or Robot Chicken. The cutscenes in particular, where you can see the figures moving on their joints, really brings me back to the weekends I sat on the floor and watched these shows at home. And while Judero does have its funny moments, the game has a strong preference for the sentimental. Judero begins with a tearful goodbye between Mob and himself, but it isn't entirely sad. Judero tells Mob that
there's nothing to be gained from being shy of goodbyes. Ours was a bond most handsome. We ought not to dismiss that.
Judero wanders into a nearby town, and we can speak to just about everyone we see in this game, and just about everyone will have a story to tell. Judero feels like a game about listening to the stories of others. Each conversation drips with emotion, the persistent joy of the lighthouse lady that is thankful for everything, the blissful ignorance in that of the flower gardener that uses her job to shirk her own worries, the fear of the sitting man, concern for the McKinley brothers from up the hill. While Judero's stories offer poignant questions for the player to ponder, they sometimes offer a reflection at our own sense of self. These stories and conversations, though mostly short, all feel incredibly unique. They are collectibles in their own right, rewards for exploring every house, every area of an environment. They aren't tracked collectibles like our coins or the bestiary pages in the game, but they feel like something that you could keep pressed away in your own mind. And Judero, though it can be sad and melancholic, the game often feels like it's in a world that's quite hopeful, or at least fair. A folklore land where beasts wander the hills, where evil people have taken control of towns or corrupted individuals. This is standard fare, but upon taking these foes down, they often recognize their own shortcomings, apologize, and ask for forgiveness. We aren't slaying the unrighteous, but more slapping a wrist so that they can see their own ways. This isn't true for every enemy in the game. Some of the wicked are too far gone and will never be able to see the light, but Judero never feels like it lacks hope or a positive outlook. This makes it just a true pleasure to be in its world, and not one that you have to feel particularly guilty about. Part of this feeling comes from the game's soundtrack, beautifully composed by Spooner, Kaya, and two others, Beth Sabrensi and Charlotte Strawbridge. Most of the tracks feel like classic Celtic songs, a duo serenading you as you wander through this bright world, wistful strings glittering in your ears as you trudge through a dark dungeon. These tracks contribute to the handmade feeling that the game has as well, and I know that might sound like a backhanded compliment, but it isn't. Judero feels raw and honest. It feels like someone who is telling you the truth, because the care that was put into the game is worn on its sleeve. You know that you can trust this game. That trust goes a long way in pushing you through its short few hours, because you know that the experience will be worth it. Judero never betrayed that trust, and in its short runtime, which was about 4 hours or so, I never once thought I wasted a second. In speaking to the townsfolk in the various mystery lands I traveled, in looking for extra chests on the open waters, in taking down evil spirits that were terrorizing the land, in admiring the beautiful scenery and listening to the sounds of its world. Judero is handcrafted beauty, with a narrative that might surprise you in a few places with just how hopeful it truly is. Like I said before, words can only do so much of the heavy lifting, so I urge you to play this one yourself. Threshold is a survival horror game developed by Julien Evier. It was released on November 19th, 2024. Julien Evier has worked on a bunch of different games, working for Arcane as a QA tester on Dishonored 2, and eventually working on level design for Wolfenstein Youngblood, Deathloop, Blade, and now Crysis 4 at Crytek. During these various jobs, Evier was also working on Threshold, his own indie game that he would complete during the off hours at Arcane and Crytek. Threshold is a first-person survival horror game. I say survival horror, but Julien himself describes it as light survival horror.
I would describe it as a light survival horror experience. It's horror is also debatable, because it's more of an atmospheric and oppressing atmosphere more than an actual horror game, where there's someone chasing you or something. And so yeah, it's not really in the same exact area, I would say.
In Threshold, we play a character that is just starting a new job in a lonely mountain facility. As we board the elevator to head to the surface, we see the oxygen level decrease, introducing us to the main mechanic of Threshold. We meet our coworker named Mo, who introduces us to the basics of the job. There's a train running in front of us, and this train needs to be kept at an expected pace, set and changed by the capital as they deem necessary. To increase this speed, we must use a whistle and blow it into a horn aimed at the train. This will drain our air greatly, and to replenish our air, we must use an air canister. These happen to be made of glass, and when we use one, our character will bite the canister, shattering the glass and causing their gums and mouth to be cut up in the process. We can gather more air canisters from around the facility, ones lying on the ground or hidden in little alcoves. But we can also get tickets and feed them into a machine to get more air. There's a small observation machine at the top of the nearby river. This will tick every time a train car passes by and feed out a portion of an air canister ticket. Once the ticket is fully out, the machine will stop and alarm until we pick the ticket up. Therefore, the faster the train is moving, the faster tickets will release, and the slower it's moving, the slower the tickets will be fed out. Though we don't really control the speed of the train, we do, but we need to keep it at the expected pace at all times. If the train isn't at the expected pace, a loud alarm blasts through the facility, and our ticket machines are shut down until we fix the problem. This means no more air until the train is running properly. This is the simple setup for Threshold, and if this were just it, Threshold would still succeed at what it sets out to do. Everything in this world is balanced enough to make it tense and interesting. Trying to get more tickets, trying to stock up on air while also making sure the train is running properly keeps you in this perfectly timed loop. The feeling of the monotony of a regular job sets in, except there's nothing regular going on here. That monotony will quickly be broken as we start to explore the facility and uncover its hidden secrets. We find out pretty fast that we were sent here to replace another worker named Ni, who recently died in an accident. Scouring the facility for more clues about what happened means more time spent not getting air and not watching the train. This furthers the story, but it also adds to our workload. Top this off with the fact that discovering new things about the world will introduce questions into our character's head. We can ask Mo about these questions, but we need to use the whistle to call his elevator back to the surface, further sacrificing air to further the story. Eventually, we'll get access to a building in the center of the facility that allows us to speak with the capital. They can also answer questions, but once again, we need to sacrifice breath to talk to them. Luckily, inside the building, you can breathe unlimited air. But it's this loop and resource management that's really at the core of Threshold. It's what makes the game so interesting, and honestly, I didn't want to stop playing it once the game was over. I just wanted to manage the facility more, which kind of goes against the whole point of the game, but it's just that well done. The job monotony designed within the basic structure of the game creates the tense atmosphere and horror that the game presents. The true horror is in the mystery of the story. What happened to the person that we replaced? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of this job? Where is this train going? These questions and their possible answers are the truly terrifying things about Threshold and its world, but the loop of the game creates a tension that works in tandem with the game's narrative to create an even deeper horror. The train alarm starts going off, meaning we must rush back to the horn quickly, use our air, and crack another canister. This once again creates scars and blood on a horrific mouth meter on the left side of the screen. This caused me to cringe every time I saw it increase, every time I heard the smashing of the glass and my character spitting out blood. Threshold's art style is also just kind of gross and dirty. Everything is painted over in this brown muted color, a dreary sort of world which is only interrupted by the brief moments in which we speak to the capital, a blaring white light blasting through this impossible space. Threshold also goes even deeper. Its reveals, twists, and turns that only come in the final few moments of the game are fantastic. I was surprised at the end, even when I thought I had nailed the story down for what it was. And the ending is one of the craziest things I've seen happen in a video game. The game even lets you choose a country at the start, which will change the little flags in the facility, but this also affects the difficulty of the game. Of course, Threshold doesn't tell you which countries are harder or which are easier. I played as the good old US of A, and the game was pretty simple to me. At first, I thought this might be connected to the air quality of each country, but a user in the Steam guides posted a theory that this might be connected to the altitude of each country, meaning countries with higher altitudes are harder, providing the player less oxygen. Threshold's beauty is in its simplicity. Most of the game will be spent in this one small area, but Julian uses his level design experience well, managing to cram a lot of secrets and details into this one place. You are certain to miss a few things on your first time around, forcing you to go back for another playthrough, with lessons learned. And even though the mechanics in the game are simple and the loop is quick, the runtime is short, it's all used so well. There's no fat that needs to be trimmed here, because just like our work in this facility, Threshold is incredibly efficient with its time, characters, story, and environment. Like our character rushing to search for clues in between getting air, Threshold uses every second to its advantage. Those seconds are spent trying to make you question its world, trying to unsettle you, and trying to make you keep the train running. And at these things, Threshold succeeds. Juice Galaxy is a third-person action-adventure game developed by Fish Licka. It was released into early access on November 22nd, 2023. Juice Galaxy is one of the strangest and weirdest games that I've ever played. The goal is to harvest juice from creatures, from chests, from anywhere that we can find. And that's because juice is everything. Juice is life. Juice is the galaxy. Juice is me and you. What actually is juice, you may ask? Well, don't ask that, because that question will get you immediately killed at the start of the game, and in general will cause NPCs to go berserk on you right away.
Prepare to die.
They also make it very clear that the sky is not made of plywood. Why would it be made of plywood? That doesn't make any sense. Juice Galaxy doesn't take itself too seriously. We fight enemies either using a weapon in our left or right hand. Melee weapons are generally wielded by the left hand. We can hold left click and move the mouse to swing the weapon. This, as you can probably see, is incredibly difficult to control, but that's sort of the whole point. Juice Galaxy oozes natural comedy, not just in the weird NPCs that you'll meet that say strange things and act in odd ways, but in the general progression of the game. As we wander around and fight enemies, falling over ourselves just to move around, ragdolling as we fly through the air. Oh yeah, we can fly too. I guess most beings can fly here. This game is just damn funny. Juice Galaxy is mostly a sandbox. After we leave the classroom, fight with one of our classmates, and open up a juice door, we're let out into the world. We can run around, kill enemies, harvest juice, upgrade our stats, take on quests, seek out chests, whatever we want, really. The description of the game puts it best. Juice Galaxy is a happy place to fly around and smack things and drink juice, and explore things, and just flip around doing stuff. This sums it up better than I ever could. There's a bit more to it though, obviously. Each weapon comes with its own stats, damage, knockback, and mass. We can wield massive swords, huge crosses, baseball bats, heat-seeking missiles. The bounds for this game seem to be endless. We can also upgrade our weapons and increase the size of our weapon, just completely breaking any sort of limitations on the game. The spellbook we wield in our right hand will let us cast devious tricks on enemies, summoning suns to blow them up, bubbles that capture them and explode. The potential here is endless as well. We can collect juice shards or something to upgrade different stats on our weapons. We can collect different hats and glasses that will change our character's stats. Juice Galaxy is a perfect sandbox because it just really gives you the reins almost immediately and tells you to just have fun, kid. Some of my favorite experiences in this game were just flying around, finding random locations, fighting enemies that were way too strong for me, and then pillaging their corpses for new weapons. There's a certain point in the game where a vampire bat attacks you, and then you too become a vampire, gaining the ability to harvest dead enemies for juice after you've killed them.
Okay. You're a vampire now. Oh. Alright. I'm gonna go sleep and stuff. See ya.
The Juice Queen will also send her right-hand foot, Tony, after you, and Tony can be pretty powerful. His massive feet shockwave sent me flying into the sky, so I powered up like an anime character and came back for revenge. The freedom in this game is just astronomical. Juice Galaxy even starts out by letting you pick the shader on your character, letting you increase or decrease the size of all of its body parts, and creating a weird little freak right from the get-go. There's even an NPC in the game that will tell you how to use the console to alter game objects, because who cares? It's not a competition, so it isn't cheating. This game was just made for you to have fun. And that really seems like the whole premise of Juice Galaxy. Just have fun. Whatever that means to you. Slay enemies with massive swords, drive a car owned by a talking sign around the landscape and hit sick jumps, try to fly as far out as you can, talk to NPCs and take on quests to kill bosses. It's entirely up to you. But Juice Galaxy is very rarely ever going to tell you no, unless you question Juice, of course. The game is still in early access and receiving updates from the developer. I'd highly recommend trying it out because I can't wait to see this game once it's chock full of content and massive arsenals of weapons. Get out there, harvest some juice, and definitely don't fly straight upwards to see if the sky is made of plywood, because it totally isn't. Cruel is a roguelike first-person shooter developed by James Dornan. It was released on January 9th, 2025. I won't talk for too long about Cruel because it doesn't have a ton to talk about. The game is simple, lacking a huge variety in enemies or environments, or really even weapons. But Cruel polishes this very simple toolset and favors the classic mantra, less is more. Every weapon, though, feels useful. Every item has its purpose. Resources are limited. Time is limited. Movement is limited. It's through this limitation that the game expresses the sentiments of its title, cruelty. Cruel is a pretty difficult game. We run around floors of this building, shooting enemies and trying to survive. We start out with a simple revolver, but as we progress through the levels, we gain access to more weapons, like the shotgun or the SMG. Taking damage means that our health goes down. We can refill our health with sodas retrieved from vending machines throughout each of the levels. These only refill about half of our health bar, but Fizz is probably our most important resource in this game. You would think it's raw health or ammo, but it isn't. Once we reach the end of a level, we'll hit a landing floor. Here we have three choices. We can progress forward, we can feed the dog, or we can gamble. Feeding the dog a soda allows us to choose from two randomized upgrades. These can increase raw health, they can make headshots refill our health, they can make melee weapons have increased durability. Because of this, we always need to keep at least one soda on hand, and honestly, we need one stored as well because we don't regenerate health in between floors. Choosing gamble in between floors allows us to play trick or treat with a bathroom stall. If we lose this gamble, which is just random, we'll have to start back over from the beginning, so it honestly wasn't worth it for me. We can also wield melee weapons in the game. These can be found on the floor or dropped from enemies. We can throw these to kill enemies from afar or chop heads off up close. Enemies hit pretty hard, and that's part of what makes this game so punishing. If we die, we restart from the first floor all over again. We have to be very careful about encountering enemies, ensuring that we get headshots as often as we can, and trying to keep our distance. You might think that this means Cruel is a game you have to take slow, but that's the opposite of what this game has you do. As we start the first level of the game, the building underneath us is burning. This means that fire is constantly chasing us, licking our heels as we fight enemies. We need to move quickly through rooms. We need to manage our health. We need to make sure that we grab sodas. We need to manage our ammunition and melee weapon durability. While there isn't technically much to Cruel, it feels like we have a ton to keep track of, and that's just because everything in the game has a significant weight. Everything matters just as much as the next mechanic. You can't leave anything out or ignore it because you need all of the tools in your toolbox to get through the game. And maybe I'm overselling the difficulty of this game. You should know that I'm not that great at boomer shooters, so you might be able to breeze through this thing like it's nothing. But in my opinion, Cruel requires perfection from its players, and that standard that the game requires is pretty difficult to meet. But because of that, when we do live up to the game's ideal, it feels incredibly satisfying. That's kind of the whole point of Cruel, a trial by fire, and when we land a perfect floor, it feels fantastic. The ideal is that we lose no health on a level. This is because we won't have to use any sodas throughout that level. This means we can store them, but also we can use them on upgrades. But the thing is, this ideal starts to break down as the levels move on. Enemies become more aggressive, their numbers grow, and the perfect run is a concept that becomes lost on us. We start to run on animal instinct. When that kicks in, the player no longer has control over the run, it's left up to fate. Of course, the end goal is to get good enough, to know the seed that you're playing on enough, and become proficient enough to carry that ideal throughout every floor. It's a high task, and I wouldn't recommend this game to everyone watching, but if you think you're up to the task, then Cruel will give you hours of replayability and simple fun. I hope that you found something in this video that you think is worth checking out. I played a ton of games for this video, and some I wound up not including just because I felt like I couldn't find a lot to say about them. I only wanted to include games that I genuinely wanted more people to see and play. So if something here looked interesting, go give it a try. And if you really like it, be sure to leave a review on Steam. Reviews really help these developers out, and they push the game further. That's my whole goal here, to get more eyes on these projects, and hopefully more people playing them. If you have recommendations for underrated indie games, leave them in the comments below. I'm always looking for new games to try and new experiences to have, so I'll definitely check them out. Also, shout out to all of the people that support me over on Patreon. You guys are fantastic. And if you'd like your name to appear on this list of awesome people, go to the link in the description to sign up now. I provide early access to my videos, scattered updates, and some exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Recently, I've been watching and reviewing the Resident Evil movies over there, and it's been a great time. See you next time. Bye, Dad.